Hi, my name is Shannon Kennedy. Today I'm going to do a brief educational video for Adderall. What it is, a small history, and some potential side effects that can occur when using this prescription drug. Adderall is a central nervous system stimulant. It's typically prescribed for people who have ADHD, also known as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, as well as narcolepsy. It is composed of amphetamines and dextroamphetamines. I'm using my notepad over here to look at notes, so excuse if I glance over for a few seconds. Adderall is a Schedule II drug. It's classified with things such as opioids and codeine. The potential for it to be abused is relatively high, which is why it does have the schedule. It is illegal to have or to take if you do not have a prescription for it. Using amphetamines can affect dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin in the brain. But the exact explanation of how Adderall improves impairments of ADHD is really unknown. So there's not really been quite a long-term study either on the effects that Adderall can have on the body. But we'll talk more about side effects later in this video. So just a brief history of Adderall. In 1887, a Romanian chemist known as Lazar Egleanu, if that's how you pronounce that. If not, I'm sorry for the offense if it has happened. This chemist first synthesized amphetamine, which is kind of where Adderall was born, not necessarily, but the start of. Though he synthesized amphetamine, he never took the time to study the physiological effects that this drug had on the body. So later in 1929, a biochemist known as Gordon Ailes did just that, where he physically injected himself with 50 milligrams of amphetamine to figure out what the physical effects would be on a body when using amphetamines. He did this to create a drug that was more potent than ephedrine. That's how you pronounce that. It's spelled, let me tell you, Ephedrine. I don't know how to pronounce that, and I'm so sorry. But anyways, he did this so that he could figure out something that was more potent to treat things like asthma, allergies, and colds. During his research with this, after his experience, he noted that he felt just a general sense of well-being. He also had extreme fatigue, or rather not fatigue, but insomnia. He said that the night after that occurred, he really could not sleep at all, but that he felt more focused and a stronger sense of well-being, as said before. He really liked the effects, apparently, because in 1934, the biochemist partnered with a pharmaceutical company, and they unveiled a new nasal decongestant called Benzedrine, or Benzedrine. Benzedrine was a hit, and it was not long before it started being used recreationally. It was used in many different ways, though it was produced at first for asthma or allergies or colds or things like that. It was said that it can help you to lose weight, so there was a big increase on housewives using Benzedrine. We had spoke previously in the class about how drugs were advertised. Benzedrine was certainly advertised in this time period. You saw commercials, television shows, sitcoms, things like that, that would make jokes or advertisements about the use of Benzedrine. Like I stated shortly before, housewives would use Benzedrine to use them to lose weight or to become a better housewife, to be more present at home, to have more energy with the children, things like that. So that was just one instance of how this drug was being abused already from the get-go. It was also said that Benzedrine could potentially reduce the symptoms of the menstrual cycle for women, like cramps. So at one point in time, women would just go and they would get their prescriptions for Benzedrine, and they would be like, wow, this is going to help my menstrual cycle. But really, in reality, the high that they felt from using the amphetamine at the time known as Benzedrine was just great. So it just kept being abused. The Nazis used it in war, and then pretty much everyone, college students, workers, businessmen, everyone used Benadryl. This led to a drug act that was passed in the 1960s that kind of just took away the ability to freely get amphetamines, which was good because the statistics for that dropped substantially. At this time, it is beyond the scope of my research of what those statistics are, but I am aware that they did drop after the 60s. Okay, so like I said before, some effects of Adderall on the body did include feelings of well-being, alertness, focus. It helped improve concentration. It also raises your blood pressure, your body temperature, and your heart rate, which help the user to feel more awake. Thus would lead to the insomnia and not sleeping. And those later would lead to negative side effects. And we'll speak about those in just a few moments. The use of Adderall or the amphetamine could give an overall pleasant feeling. Like I said, kind of feeling on top of the world, very present in work, being able to focus and zone in. Some users who would use Adderall have said that hours would go by and they would be able to just snap into their work. They'd look at the clock and realize that their day of work would be over. It would help them to accomplish tasks or projects very quickly, easily, because of how well they were able to focus in. Also, another effect of Adderall is thought to block the reuptake of norepinephrine and dopamine in the presynaptic neuron. Now that fact right there is one that I'm not very well equipped on to explain to you. But I'm sure if I've used a link from the FDA that is giving a really great example of that. I, for one, however, since this is a brief video, will not go into the detail of that specific fact. So we'll talk about some negative side effects now. It can include headaches, dizziness, blurred vision. Other negative side effects of using Adderall for a long period of time can include insomnia and GI complications that can include diarrhea, upset stomach, loss of appetite, things of that nature. Also, weight loss is a very big factor of the use of Adderall. Like I said, which is why the use of that amphetamine during the time period prior to the 60s, that's why housewives would use it typically, because it would help them to lose weight, make their husbands feel good about being their husbands. Some more serious side effects of the use of Adderall or amphetamines can include sudden death, strokes, cardiac abnormalities, hypertension, and other cardiovascular conditions. Some behavioral disturbances such as bipolar, aggressive, or psychotic episodes. I watched a short documentary on Netflix, about an hour long, called Take Your Pills. I do plan on using that as my next project, hopefully, if it is approved, for a review or critique. But anyways, there is a psychologist in that documentary who said that there were some instances where people who used Adderall or Ritalin for a long period of time would show symptoms of psychosis, even though they had never had history of it in the past. They would have hallucinations, they would have bursts of aggression, they would have bipolar swings, despite having no history in the past. So that is something definitely to think about if ever considering using Adderall to help with symptoms or even for recreational use. Not that that is suggested, however, but recreational abuse is alive and well, and we'll talk about that statistic in just a moment as well. Some other negative side effects of long-term use of Adderall can include long-term suppression of growth, seizures, and can also intensify tics or symptoms of Tourette's syndrome. From personal experience, I do have a family member who is epileptic and was also diagnosed with ADD. She started taking Adderall and because she was epileptic, she saw her seizures increase. Before we knew it, she'd probably have 3 or 4 seizures a week. And because of the lack of proper research about the mixing of her medications with the Adderall with her prescriptions that would help suppress her seizure activity, we were unaware that that was the cause. After doing a Duke research study with the University of Duke, they were able to say, you should not be on Adderall because obviously it's making these symptoms worse. So they found, thankfully, a different route and was able to fix that. So that's also something to think about. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our video. I'm going to talk about a few facts that I read off of the FDA website for Adderall. The first one would be that the FDA recommends prescribing the least amount of amphetamines feasible in order to minimize the possibility of overdose or abuse. It's very typical, obviously, it's not a secret that many college students in their undergrad programs or even graduate programs, or above even, do use Adderall or things like Ritalin or other amphetamines to focus on schoolwork. I personally have not, thankfully, but I do have close friends and relatives who have confessed to using amphetamines to enhance their performance. As I spoke before, I did watch that documentary on Netflix called Take Your Pills, and they had very many different subjects who were testifying to the use of Adderall, both prescribed and not prescribed. One that really struck me as a surprise was a college football player who used Adderall to help with pain and endurance during his football games. He would talk about how he would have a lot of injuries while playing, and using Adderall kind of helped him focus so much on the game. Not that the pain wasn't there, but that he could almost ignore the pain and get through that night or that game, his play period. And he said that it really helped his endurance, and he was not prescribed the Adderall. So he went to a doctor and eventually had him prescribe Adderall. Whether or not that was typically legal, I'm not sure. His face was blurred out on that documentary, so I'm going to assume no. But that's just one example of how Adderall can be misused or abused in a college environment to help enhance your performance, to stimulate 110%. Another fact is that amphetamines like Adderall are not recommended for children under the age of 3. Like I said before, on the FDA website, it is said that ADHD cannot be diagnosed unless symptoms are present before the age of 6. Even still, to me, it's surprising that children who are diagnosed with ADHD prior to the age of 3 are not recommended to use it. It's almost common sense because of the negative side effects, but to me, isn't even 6 years old a little too young if you're going to see this whole plethora of negative possibilities for your children or for any user of Adderall, really. Another fact would be that nursing women should avoid using amphetamines. The amphetamine can be excreted into human milk. The FDA recommends that women who are currently on Adderall or have been on Adderall long term should avoid breastfeeding altogether. To me, that's a really big testament, and that's kind of an eye-opener, and I think that if I were ever presented with saying maybe I was diagnosed with such a syndrome or disorder as ADD or ADHD, I would really consider taking Adderall just from that fact alone. I would be very concerned for the health of my children and for myself if that even just small amounts excreted in human milk could harm my child. I would be curious of what the milligram of dose that I would take, how it would affect me. So, the last fact that I have is that amphetamines have been extensively abused. Like I stated before, Adderall is used by commonly by college students without prescriptions. Relating back to the documentary that I did watch, there were college students and there were forums online, and I have personally seen things on Facebook or Twitter or any kind of social media speaking about, asking if someone is willing to sell their prescription Adderalls to people. Just because the effects of that drug really do become apparent after about 40 minutes of taking it. It does help you focus. It does help you zone in on your work. People would even attest to making higher and better grades because of taking the Adderall, which was what I thought was sort of interesting to me, that the correlation between an A letter grade and the use of Adderall kind of went hand in hand. There were students that would proclaim that without the use of their Adderall, they would fail their score. To me, that wouldn't be the case because your efforts, while they're important, it's also how well you obtain the content too. So I was a little confused by that, but it was understood. Yeah. And that is the end of my notepad notes. So, one last fact would be that the drugabuse.gov reported in 2013 that 10.7% of participating college students professed to using Adderall as a stimulant without having a prescription to it, as opposed to non-college students who weighed in about 6% of use. So that was pretty different for me to read. The sources I used were the FDA online and the drugabuse.gov. Alright, well, that is my informational video, short educational clip about what I found in my research for Adderall and amphetamines. And I hope that, maybe not the professor viewing, but to someone watching, if they ever do, that they learn just a little bit. And also that you would think twice about prescribing children for Adderall. My personal view on that would be that there would be different ways to cope, different ways to learn how to get about a disorder, than to just prescribe medication and suppress those symptoms. I think that it might be better to learn how to navigate around them, because we have seen some negative side effects of what Adderall can do to a human body, specifically a child. So that's just food for thought. Thank you very much.